Welcome to In Their 20s, a podcast with the best advice. I'm your host, Landon Campbell, and today we spoke with Lainy Painter. She's a partner at Craft Ventures, which is a venture capital firm focused on crafting the next companies of the world. Lainy invests primarily in SaaS and Marketplaces, and she has a strong interest in complex vertical markets such as real estate, healthcare, education, construction, and financial services. Lainy is an active member of AllRaise, the nonprofit dedicated to increasing representation in venture capital. I had a great time speaking with Lainy, and you're going to love her advice. So let's jump into our interview to hear about her professional journey in VC and how she became a partner before 30. All right, so Lainy, let's get started. And again, thank you so much. I'm really excited for this discussion. I'd love to just begin at the beginning. So if you could just kind of prompt our listeners to understand who you are, what you're currently doing, and why you love your job.
Absolutely. My name is Lainy Painter. I'm a partner at Craft Ventures, an early stage venture capital firm based in San Francisco. And I love my job because I get to work with really smart, really driven, really interesting founders every single day of the week, every single day of the year, and get to learn from them, work with them, and garner insights from them.
Of course, I love that. And a lot of those insights I want to be able to share today with our listeners. So I've spoken with a lot of people, like in VC, and it's just always so interesting to hear about the path to VC. So I'd love to hear, who were you, during your college years? Did you plan on going into VC, or, what was the track looking like?
I did not plan on going into VC when I was an undergrad. I don't think I knew what VC was. I went to college at William & Mary in Virginia, which is not, the epicenter of the startup universe. And I had, kind of found my way into an analyst role at Goldman Sachs right out of undergrad. And the way that I got there was actually through reaching out to another alumni who I had never interacted with before and had actually taken a very different career path than the one that I was trying to. He had gone into the Army, gone to business school, and found his way into the San Francisco office of Goldman Sachs. And he was actually on a list of people not to reach out to from my university. But I had another friend who said, I think this person's, in a role that you might be really interested in. Why don't you just try him? And the email is almost certainly firstname.lastname@gs.com. Just give it a shot. Never hurts to try. And lo and behold, he answers and says, it's so weird. No one ever reaches out to me. And I said, I think I know why. I think you're on the wrong list. And it was through him that I originally got connected with Goldman. And Goldman really offered me an opportunity to have a crash course in Silicon Valley. I was sitting out in San Francisco in kind of the heart of everything. And I got a up close look at how startups scale, both in the private and public markets. I was able to work with household names like PayPal and LinkedIn on transactions. And I also saw the incredible influence that startups could have on pop culture, on the workplace, and on the world. And it was there that I first really got excited about joining and working with startups.
Of course, Silicon Valley is a beautiful place. So it's amazing that you had an opportunity to work early in your career with so many awesome people, hardworking individuals. So thinking about your early 20s, being thrown into this environment, working hard, obviously I can sense the entrepreneurial spirit you have. What are some just best practices that you developed early in your career that you still use today?
Being hyper responsive and hyper reliable was actually a way to really set yourself apart. There's a baseline level of competence. And then from there, it's really about just trying to keep as many balls in the air as possible and being the type of person that if someone offers you a project that they know that if they check in a day or two, that you'll have gotten it done. And so that was actually not something that I expected to be a differentiator when I walked in the door, but I quickly realized was something that could really set me apart was just sheer reliability.
Of course, I love that. Something I also want to talk about is multitasking. Something that makes 20-somethings a little anxious sometimes, like you want to focus on the day-to-day, you want to focus on your responsibility, but let's say new projects arise here or there. how do we juggle everything? What is your personal advice when it comes to multitasking?
So I think it depends on who you are and what sort of structure works best for you. I am an eternal believer in to-do lists and keeping everything written down. If I don't write it down, it'll just play in my head and take up 10% of my mental bandwidth just trying to remember that I have to get these 15 things done. So I'm much more committed to putting pen to paper. And then the other best practice that I learned pretty early on is to ask people for deadlines. People oftentimes don't reach out to you and tell you need to get this done by this exact day and minute. Occasionally they will, but oftentimes they'll just ask you if you can handle something. And it's really helpful to say by when, because you want to be able to prioritize effectively so that you're not spending burning the midnight oil on something that really doesn't need to be done for another week, or disappointing someone who expected you to get something done immediately when you didn't have the ability to get that done at the time. And once you kind of get into that practice, it becomes much easier to figure out, what's at the top of your to-do list, and how to kind of best fulfill your obligation of that being that most reliable person.
I think that's super important. I just love the points on reliability. That's something a lot of 20-somethings, don't realize, but you need to be that go-to person. And even if you don't see like a direct, like tomorrow, like, I'm getting my kudos, or like, next week I'm getting recognized. If you're just reliable every single time, it will pay off. And clearly as it has, because Craft Ventures, I want to discuss how you had an opportunity with this company. Was it really because of everything that you did before? Just, the reliability, the patience, did that put you in this situation?
So I have taken a bit of a winding path to get to Craft Ventures. When I left Goldman, I actually went to a startup called Gainsight, which is customer success software. So to use an analogy, what Salesforce is to your sales team, Gainsight is to your account managers or customer success managers. It's a software to make sure that people are staying on top of their clients and being reliable. And it was an early stage startup when I joined, and the need for account managers to use software may seem extremely obvious today, but it was actually unnecessary when software was sold as a one-time sale. Mm-hmm. The advent of subscription software, when basically SaaS came to exist, created an acute need for a way to track the health of existing customers for the very first time and ensure that they didn't churn and that they continued to be customers. So before the advent of customer success software, you couldn't answer questions like, who is using this product? How often? What features? What modules? Are they frustrated with bugs? Are they happy with the new features? Do they have 50 outstanding support tickets? And if you reach out to them, are they going to bite your head off because they're really upset with your company today? Those sorts of questions, you didn't have to answer them when there was a one-time sale. So Gainsight was really my masterclass in getting to watch the CEO there, Nick, and the head of marketing, Anthony, build this company and frankly, build this category for the first time. So they identified a need, they created a solution, and then they marketed that solution to the world. And they really are synonymous with the term customer success software because they built it and they defined what it is. And so that was an incredible opportunity for me to not only see how startups run and how everything works, but also how to create a category and what it really means to do that out of thin air, identifying a need that people may or may not fully understand at the time that you're first creating the company. I ultimately left Gainsight to join Battery Ventures, which is another venture capital firm. And that's where I first learned to invest. And I've been investing in startups ever since.
That's so neat. Wow. So just, it seems that you had so much, skills and just like expertise general from joining Gainsight, like that startup. And if I understand correctly, you were with Gainsight for a year, correct?
That's right. Yep.
So do you recommend, and I believe the answer is yes, but I'd love to break it down a little bit, that more 20-somethings should work for a startup, even if it's for a limited time?
I think it's a really great experience. I don't think it's for everyone, but for me personally, it gave me a whole different set of skills that I absolutely didn't have exposure to from being in a large Fortune 500 company. And I really learned the biggest contrast for me coming from a large company was when I had a question at Goldman, there was probably someone who sat in that seat for 20 years who had the answer for me. Yeah. And it was my job to find that person and get that answer. Totally the opposite at Gainsight. You've been in the seat for a week. You've spent 15 minutes on this problem. Well, you are now the expert and you need to go figure out how to solve this problem for the first time, because nobody else at this company is going to work on this exact same issue. It would be wildly inefficient and a relatively small company. So, that may mean you reach out to a friend in a similar role at another company that perhaps has, seen a similar issue, or it may just mean that you're doing research on your own and figuring out what's the best way to solve this problem? How can I learn how to solve this problem for the first time and really take total ball control? And for me personally, it was a really formative experience and a ton of fun. So from that perspective, I would definitely recommend it.
Of course, I love that. And you made a really great point that, working for a startup, it's not for everybody, but it was for you. And I really love that you point that out. Before we pivot to your career and venture with Battery and Craft, I have one more question just with the startup. So I understand, like sometimes comp isn't exactly, what you expect or want it to be when working for a startup. But, I always love extracting, from startup founders, people that have worked with startup, the value of working for a startup. So if you could just share with the audience, not your specific comp, but, just how it is justified to just get that startup experience.
Absolutely. It's an opportunity actually to try on several different roles at once in a way that's very difficult to replicate. You're a problem solver and you're working to solve whatever is the most acute pain point in the organization. And that gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of ownership. So on the one hand, you're able to typically be promoted faster or rise into roles faster. And whether or not you're promoted, if the organization goes from 50 people to 500 people, you have a lot of institutional knowledge with which to share and also to kind of rise as the organization grows. The other thing is it's just an opportunity if you're someone who started their career in marketing but wants to try something in product, or started their career in finance but wants to try their hand at event planning. A startup is an incredible place where people are just looking for more help. And so if you are still trying to figure out, what it is that you want to ultimately pursue, a startup is kind of an expedited research project to figure out what do you gravitate towards, what are your strengths and weaknesses, in a way that's far more flexible than, needing to transfer to a different division or a different office in order to get a different type of responsibility.
Of course, I think that's a great point. I had a chance to work for a startup while in college with Cameo. It's so interesting. You wear so many different hats. And I agree, the people that you look to answers at, or where you look for answers at, they probably just have only done the position that you're in for a few weeks or a few months. So that is the main difference between working for a startup and a larger company. I think the experience is remarkable. So that's awesome. And thank you for touching on that. So now to transition into your career in venture, your jobs with Battery and then now Craft Ventures. You've worked with so many entrepreneurs, as you said in the beginning, across different industries. What are some of the best skills that you've seen from a lot of these founders and entrepreneurs?
So in general, I find that entrepreneurs are really smart, really driven, and they think outside the box. And so that is generally, frankly, table stakes. And that's an incredible table stakes of people that you get to work with all day long. The questions that I'm normally asking are, why you and why now? So what is it about your experience to date that gives you a unique insight into this market? And why, 20 years after, widespread ubiquity of the internet, is this being created now? Software has been around for decades. The internet's been around for decades. Why hasn't this product existed before? Mm-hmm. Do you have some sort of technological breakthrough, or more likely, do you have some sort of innovation on the distribution side? So is there a reason that you can distribute this more efficiently than someone else could? Perhaps 20 years ago or 10 years ago, if you built this piece of software, it'd be really hard to get it into the hands of the people that you're trying to sell it into. But now all of a sudden, it's far more profitable. or you figured out a trick to give away something for free and then upsell over time. And those are the sorts of questions that I love to hear from founders. How did they come up with this problem, and why do they have a unique vantage point to solve it?
Of course, I think that's great advice and insight. I think there are so many founders. Every majority of founders obviously has confidence in his or herself and thinks that they have that next $1 billion idea. But you really need to be able to communicate that and understand, what makes your idea unique. And those are the types of questions, obviously, you ask in your role. So that's really cool to know. So second to last question I have for you is just on mentorship. So obviously at Craft Ventures, you work under David Sachs. That's amazing. And you probably had so many more awesome mentors during your career. What are some things that you've learned from these mentors, and how have you tried to pay it forward? How have you served as a mentor to other younger people?
Absolutely. I've learned so much from different mentors over every stage of my career. And I think each mentor has taught me something different based on their own life experience. So at Craft, I am super lucky to work with David Sachs, who founded PayPal and then later founded Yammer, which sold to Microsoft for over $1 billion, and to work for Jeff Fleur, who co-founded StubHub and was the CEO until it sold to eBay back in 2006. And the rest of the team at Craft is actually equally impressive in terms of their backgrounds. And everyone has different operating experience and different life experience. And it is incredibly unique to get to learn from such smart, such driven, and with such diverse sets of backgrounds, whether people were heads of sales or heads of product or heads of operations. Their collective experience has made me, that much smarter. And I will say, the best part of all of it is, the opportunity to pick up the phone and ask a question and sanity check. Because, a lot of what we do at early stage investing is forming a hypothesis and trying to test it. And so having people who have, different experiences with which to test those hypotheses is just invaluable to have as a network of people to bounce ideas off of.
Love that. That's so powerful. Thank you for breaking that down. And now, the last question I have for you is just mainly focus on what's next. You've accomplished so much in your 20s. Your road to becoming partner of a very well-known VC firm before 30 is just remarkable. So I would just love to, speak about what you do in your day-to-day today and your plans for the future.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I still spend a lot of time on is that the venture capital and startup ecosystem is very unequal. 12% of decision makers at US-based venture capital funds are women. 12% of venture funds go to founding teams with at least one female. Black founders receive 1% of venture capital dollars. And the founders and funders in Silicon Valley decide, what products get built by whom and for whom. The entire technology ecosystem suffers from a lack of diversity. And I want to have a large hand in helping with that. So I've been involved with an organization called All Raise over the last several years, which endeavors to change the startup ecosystem, both on the funder and founder side. And it's really important to me that we continue to make progress. We have made some progress, but there's a lot of room left to go. And I think it's, incumbent on all of us to take that on and work hard over, it's going to take years and decades of progress, but it is, there's no more noble task to work on.
It's on all of us. That's a super important point. Lainy, this is all super important. And that subject specifically means a lot to me that you touched on. I do work with an organization called Black Venture Capital Consortium, BVCC, marketing advisor there. And it's something that I've really seen. There's a really big problem. And I know we've made a lot of progress in the past year. A lot of attention has gone to these crazy numbers of yes, 1% of Black funding went to Black brown founders around 2019 and 2020. It's just crazy to hear that. I understand it's gotten better, but we still have a long, long ways to go. So that's amazing that you are active in this fight. All Raise is an awesome organization. So really great to hear that.
Yes, I like to be careful when I say we've made progress, that we have far more progress left to do than we have accomplished thus far. So it's okay to be heartened by a little bit of success, but the good fight is going to continue to occur over the coming years.
No, I completely agree. Well said. Lainey, this was a pleasure. I'm just so happy you were able to join the podcast today. This was a lot of fun, just hearing about your professional journey, advice for 20 somethings, and especially hearing about what you're looking to do for the future is really awesome. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And aside from the interview, I will let you know when this goes live. But again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It really means a lot.
And no problem at all. And if I can do anything for you in the future, like now or in the future, don't ever hesitate to let me know. This is a really, really cool project. And like I said, it reminds me a lot of, what I was trying to put together. And honestly, like great excuses to reach out and meet new people are always, always a good thing.
Of course. So networking is key.